Black Night Reptile room today. There's a host, Natalie, and there's a co-host,
Kevin. And who are we joined by here today?
Polka Dot.
Polka Dot is our what?
Leopard Gecko.
Leopard Gecko. So besides Polka Dot here, who else are we joined by?
Rose, hognose snake.
Our hognose snake. Today, our video is on our leopard gecko.
Yeah.
Polka Dot.
Yeah.
It's a good name. And then real quick, before we do begin, as always, Natalie and I wanted to thank our new subscribers. There was a lot of them this past week. Dale Dan, DKD, Figgytown YT, Silver Dragon, Baker 52, Kevin Norwood, great first name by the way, Madison Russell family, and Ainsley Hillard. But if we ever do miss you guys, please let us know. Me and Natalie sincerely thank you guys for it. There's also a lot of other people that subscribed, and I guess their accounts are private, but we couldn't see them. But Natalie and I greatly appreciate each and every one of you, don't we?
Yes, and thank you guys.
Thank you guys very much. We are today doing our video on our aberrant leopard gecko. Aberrant is the morph of this specific leopard gecko.
Yeah.
And we're joined by Rose also, right?
Yeah.
And she is getting big, isn't she?
Yeah, look how big she is.
I remember when she was just a wee little thing right in your hand.
And look, now how big
Her whole body coiled up was just like able to fit in your hand.
And look at this.
Yeah, she's big. She's gonna get a lot bigger too. And then a cool little fun fact about Polka Dot here, Natalie had all say-so in picking her out. Do you remember when we got Polka Dot here?
Yeah.
You remember when we got her?
Yeah.
What made you pick her over the other ones?
Because I did not know what these guys are. I don't know what snake this is, but
Well, this one's a gecko.
yeah, and this one.
And geckos are pretty great. Really great, actually.
Yeah.
As always, here today, we're gonna go over some cool general facts about leopard geckos, the enclosure, and diet, right?
Yeah.
Sound good?
And heat lighting.
Huh.
And heat lighting.
Heat and lighting, exactly. But do you notice she's like a little drabber color than she usually is?
No.
She's kind of like, her colors aren't as bright. That's because she's getting ready to shed.
No.
So if you guys have ever seen a gecko shed, it's pretty cool. Dad actually never used to be a fan of geckos. The only gecko I've ever had as a pet was a little tokay gecko when I was like a little older than you. But I've never really been a huge fan of leopard geckos. However, now I kind of feel like the dad that never wanted the pet, and then the kid gets the pet, and now they're like absolutely in love with it. I love this little girl.
Yeah.
She is pretty cool. But all around, leopard geckos are really cool and very cute. Everything from, look at that little smile she's got.
Yeah.
A cute little smile to her little gecko kisses, as you like to call them.
Yeah.
And the way they wag the end of their tail when they're hunting. You seen that the other day, right?
Yeah. Guys, if you had one of them, when you feed them crickets, they wag their tail before they eat it.
They wag their tail like a little dog, don't they?
Yeah.
That's pretty cute.
But snakes like this do not do that.
No, she doesn't wag her tail.
Yeah. Because
Now-
she isn't a leopard gecko.
Isn't a gecko, right?
Yeah.
Now, do you remember why they call them leopard geckos?
No.
They call them leopard geckos because of their kind of leopard-esque patterns to them. The normal morphs kind of look more like it than this one here. But does she look like a leopard to you?
Yeah.
Yeah? You think so?
Do
She
you,
could be a big cat.
do you
They kind of got like cat eyes.
Do you think she does?
Yeah, I think she does. And I love the beautiful like little orange in her tail and the like blue right above her eyes.
Yeah, look at her little face.
So leopard geckos are entirely native to like northern India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. That's where they naturally come from in the wild. But the overwhelming majority of leopard geckos that you'll see here today are all captive bred, and that's a good thing, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you that it's Aunt Haley's party after in the morning.
Yes, we have your Aunt Haley's graduation party, so congratulations, Haley, on graduating, right?
Yes.
Leopard geckos are probably the most common, well, not only the most common gecko there is, but one of the most common pet reptiles you can get. How many reptile shows have we been to where people are selling leopard geckos?
Like 5 or 4 or 6.
Like every single one of them, right?
Yeah.
And do you remember how many little geckos they had at the last one?
No.
You don't remember like those 2 or 3 tables that were full of little baby ones?
Actually, I do.
Yeah. A lot of people, you can find leopard geckos literally anywhere. I was even surprised to see how many morphs of them that there are out now.
Yeah.
Like from this one here to normal to, remember those all orange ones?
Yeah.
That I think they call them like sunfire? Those ones were beautiful, weren't they?
Yeah, we could have got one of them.
We could have, but do you also remember those teeny little like all black ones?
Yeah.
They were expensive. They were like $1,500, but boy, were they beautiful. They were cool.
Well, we couldn't get one, but if we had enough money for that, we could.
Well, maybe one day we can get one of them, but they were seriously cool. So these pictures of those all black, midnight black ones that we're showing you here actually come to us by TikTok user Leopard Gecko 00, where we're gonna display the pictures here. They make some beautiful leopard geckos. These guys have some awesome pictures of them. We'll put the description and everything in the link below, but definitely check them out. They have some really cool leopard geckos.
Yeah.
And I love leopard geckos now.
Yeah.
Leopard geckos in captivity have a lifespan of like 10 to 20 years. That's a long time. And only get to about 7 to 11 inches. That's less than a foot. That's a very big difference compared to like your Savannah monitor and the Nile monitor, right?
Yeah.
He's only going to be like a quarter of the size. Very small compared to them.
Yeah.
But we like smaller animals too. They're cute.
Smaller than that Savannah.
Way smaller?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's gonna be lucky if he even gets to the size of your Savannah monitor's tail. Probably the most noticeable thing you will notice on leopard geckos is their thick tail. Do you remember what that tail is for? And why it's like thicker like that?
To store and fat.
To store fat and energy, right?
Yeah, to store and fat and energy.
Exactly. They store fat in that tail, which essentially converts to energy for them.
And guys, do you know why their tail is so fat? Because if...
There's a spider on our camera, guys. You see it? You see it? Oh God. What were you saying?
But guys, do you know why that fat tail is?
Why?
Because their tail is really fat, because if we don't have food for him, he can feed his own self with his tail.
You are absolutely right in that sense, but we always feed him, right?
Yeah.
He gets fed plenty.
But if we don't have any crickets, we can't feed them.
You're right, and that's kind of like in the wild, is they can go for a little longer without eating. If there's like no food around or anything, they can kind of store and convert that fat in their tail to essentially feed them.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
The topic of their tail, what is one really important thing that you want to tell the viewers about her tail?
If you hold a tail, her tail can whip right off.
They can drop the tail, right?
Yeah, and guys, I saw a video about a Parton's lizard. His tail dropped off.
And it's gross looking, ain't it?
Yeah, it was look gross.
So they actually use that as a defense mechanism. So if a predator latches onto their tail or tries to eat them from the tail first, they can pop that tail off and run away with their life. They'll be missing their tail, but
Yeah.
they survived, right?
Yeah.
And I do honestly think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do honestly think that worries Natalie when holding her, especially that she's fearful that you might accidentally grab her by the tail and she drops that tail, right?
Yeah.
I think that does worry her a bit. So hands down, what Natalie and I would consider one of the best things about leopard geckos is just how laid back and docile they are. However, I mean, they can be a little more aggressive as babies, right?
Yeah.
Especially when they're just this teeny tiny thing.
Yeah.
And we're these like giant monsters picking them up and he thinks we're gonna eat them, right?
Yeah, but guys.
We wanna eat them.
Yeah, but guys. Do what Daddy's doing right now.
Yeah, just let her walk hand to hand. Don't pin her down. Don't try to hold her down. Just let her do it.
Yeah.
Now, although they are super laid back and super docile, as you can see just from looking at them, they are pretty fragile, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
That even a pretty short fall could hurt them pretty badly, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, she just seems like all around like you might break something if you squeeze her too hard, right?
Yeah.
So you definitely have to be very mindful of that with these guys, as they're very delicate, especially as babies.
Yes.
And as much as I would say that a leopard gecko is a kid-friendly reptile, we would definitely recommend supervision, right?
Yeah.
Daddy's always with you when you're holding her, right?
Yeah.
So you're good enough that you're confident with her that you can hold her no problem.
Yeah.
Kind of like her now.
Yeah.
You got no problem holding her.
Yeah.
On that subject, I feel that leopard geckos make an absolutely excellent, I don't really want to say beginner reptile, but a great reptile if you are just getting into the hobby. This is your very first reptile, or you're getting a reptile for like your kid, right?
Yeah.
Because she's all yours. Now, for me personally, as a parent, I feel a leopard gecko is a great pet to start your little girl, your little boy, your kid to start to understand reptiles, to start to respect them, to be responsible for them.
Yeah.
Because you do everything for her. You clean her cage, you change her water, you spray the water down, you feed her, you do everything for her.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like me giving you that responsibility.
Yeah.
And you've definitely made Daddy proud.
Even I do it to all the reptiles, even her.
You do. You absolutely do. Definitely helps having such a awesome kid.
Yeah.
I think you're awesome.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello, girlie. And the payoff for a kid is that they get to hold an incredibly awesome reptile that when it comes to getting bit or something like that, it's not very common and it's not going to do any damage. It's not like getting bit by a Nile monitor or tail whipped by a monitor, scratched up. You're not going to get severely injured from a leopard gecko.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
All of this supervised, of course. Now, one of the only downsides to that is the fact that they can drop that tail. And that's something that when we recommend supervision, you really need to keep an eye on, especially if it's for a kid holding them, that they're not grabbing them by the tail, they're not really pinning them in place, picking them up by the tail, or really messing with the tail. They're not really they're not like chomping at the bit to just say, I just want to lose this piece of me. But they will do it in the case that they feel like they're in danger.
Yeah.
Because they lose that tail, they're losing a source of energy and food, pretty much, right?
Yeah, and guys, some people people have leopard geckos, but I saw a video about a person let go of a leopard gecko.
They let it go?
Yeah.
That's never good.
And they let go in the road.
Can't do that. Never, ever, ever release your pets into the wild. Never.
Yeah.
So Natalie decided to trade her hognose snake out for the parrot.
Yeah, and guys, here he
What's
is.
your parrot's name?
His name is Rainbow Ferret.
Rainbow Ferret. Is that because ferret rhymes with parrot?
Yeah.
But the main reason that she would drop that tail is if you try to grab her by the tail or restraining her by the tail. That's definitely a don't, right?
Yeah.
Babies will eventually outgrow that, like, I just need to escape and run away mindset, right?
Yeah.
But if you're like rescuing or even buying them as an adult that has not been handled much, I mean, they're pretty quick, right? She will just throw herself right out of your hand, won't she?
Yeah.
Without even looking back or down. But Natalie and I have found that just letting her walk entirely on her own, hand to hand, without restraining her at all, is best with them, right?
Yeah.
Because that way she doesn't freak out like you're holding her down.
Yeah.
I'd freak out too if something just grabbed me and was like, you stand here!
Yeah.
If you take your eyes off her for a second, she will just fling herself right out of your hands, right?
Yeah.
So you gotta watch that. But in the long run, positive interactions and time is key when it comes to taming them. Natalie and I are actually going to be doing a video on lizard handling here in the near future. Remember, we've been working on that?
Yeah.
So if you guys would consider subscribing and catching that when it does come out. But we're working really hard on that one. But you also want to keep her somewhat low to the ground, or like right over top of something, or something soft. Because a short fall can really do what to her?
It can hurt her leg, it can break her leg, and
Exactly.
it could break her tail.
Exactly.
But do you see how tiny she is?
She definitely could. So you got to be very, very delicate with her.
Yeah.
She does a baby.
Yeah.
She does a baby.
Yeah.
A lizard losing their tail is rarely life-threatening. However, with a gecko, it can be a lot more detrimental than, like, let's say an anole or something like that losing their tail. But as we said, they use that tail to store fat and energy. So them losing that tail is them losing that source of energy. It would be like if me or you lost an arm or a leg.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want that.
Guys, she can lose the tail, she can dart off when she wants. She
She's
can.
walking real quick right now.
Yeah, so guys, you have to be careful with that.
And she don't even look down. She just keeps walking.
Yeah.
So definitely be careful.
Little baby.
She's just a little baby. Again, it's very rare that them losing their tail is life-threatening. However, it's something you're definitely going to have to keep clean, keep an eye on, that they still have the energy to eat, to stay active, and all of that. That's pretty much like an open wound, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you remember that one video, it's like an open wound, like something cut them open.
Yeah.
So you definitely have to keep the enclosure and the tail clean. And then Natalie and I also wanted to mention that we're not going to get too much into cohabbing. We've never had any experience in cohabbing leopard geckos. We would recommend that you check out channels like Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles, Go Herping, Snake Discovery. Take in that information and then make a decision on your own. Because we just have her. We've never cohabbed two of them together. And then on to enclosure. So leopard geckos are a ground-dwelling species, comparative to like geckos that are arboreal, or as Natalie likes to call them, sticky geckos. The ones that can like climb up glass and plastic and all of that.
Yeah.
Those guys are pretty cool too, though.
Yeah, and I like to call them sticky geckos.
Sticky geckos.
And slimy geckos.
And some of them are slimy. Kind of like a salamander. Now, being a ground-dwelling species, you're going to want to focus on something with more ground space or floor space comparative to like something that's taller, more width and length than height, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that means. Now, as far as enclosures, and I'm sure you have seen people that will keep a single leopard gecko in a 10-gallon tank. Now, we're not saying they need a giant Nile monitor-sized cage,
Yeah.
but we would say a bare minimum for an adult leopard gecko is going to be a 20-gallon tank.
Yeah.
10-gallon tank is pretty small, and as we get into like lighting and everything, you'll see what we mean. You want something that's big enough to get a proper heat gradient, to where, remember we said they're cold-blooded, so they need a warm end and a cool end.
Yeah.
And you need to have a proper heat gradient in the enclosure. You also need room to add things for enrichment, things for them to explore in and do all of that.
Yeah.
That is impossible in a 10-gallon tank. Now, if you do plan on handling your leopard gecko, as always, Natalie and I would recommend a front opening enclosure so that you're extending your hand out to them and not reaching down and like death grabbing them. Because there's nothing more a lizard loves more than being death grabbed.
Yeah, and and they can really hold their body when they jump. And be careful if you are at this side of a table because they can run off of this table.
Now, reptiles, which are geckos, are wet-blooded.
Cold-blooded.
Which means in their enclosure they will need
heating and lighting.
Heating and lighting, exactly. Natalie and I have done a lot of research and we have watched a lot of different YouTubers and YouTube channels on this subject. And we would say that in that research, we have found that the overwhelming majority, when it comes to heating, they use a heat mat or heat tape, which always goes at the bottom of the enclosure, not inside the enclosure, correct? However, if all you have is a heat lamp will do perfectly fine too.
And they do need heating, lighting, crickets.
And that helps them digest their food, right?
Yeah. Heating, lighting, crickets, and something to climb on.
Exactly. Enrichment.
Yeah. And something to borrow and hide in.
Yes, and we'll go over the hide too. But I think one of the biggest reasons people do use heat mats is they are not really a basking species. They are crepuscular, and I hope I said that right, where they are most active during the twilight period or dusk and dawn. So they're not really out there during the sun being up and out there basking. They're kind of hanging out on residual heat.
Yeah.
So that's a good reason why you would rather want a heat mat compared to a actual heat lamp. But they're awake during all the times me and you are sleeping.
Yeah, because they sleep.
They sleep when we're awake.
Yeah.
And wake up like way earlier than we get up.
Yeah.
Way earlier than I'd like to get up. Now, two very huge things with a heat mat is, like we said, the heat mat always goes under the enclosure, not inside of the enclosure, right?
Yeah.
And with a heat mat, you always want a thermostat. Those heat mats don't turn on and off. You can't set them to a certain temperature. They can only get hotter and hotter. So a thermostat is absolutely necessity for a heat mat. And there's a lot of places that sell them as a combo, like they'll sell the heat mat and thermostat together for pretty cheap, and we'll put one in the description below. But you always need that. 'Tis right?
Yeah.
So as far as temperatures, they should have a hot side of 90 to 95 degrees, a ambient temperature of 80 to 85 degrees. That's pretty warm, but remember, they come from like Afghanistan and Iran, where it is very hot.
Yes, and they do need lighting.
Yes, they'll need a day and night cycle, right?
Yes.
The cool side of the enclosure should drop down to about 70 to 75, and nighttime temperatures should never get any lower than like 68 degrees. But as we were saying about a 10-gallon tank, it would be nearly impossible to get these temperatures in a tank that small, because it's got to get a lot hotter on one side than the other.
Yeah.
So with leopard geckos, UVB lighting is not necessary for them. You remember what UVB is?
Yeah.
What is it? It's kind of like the sun lighting that you're putting in the enclosure, because they're not out in the wild getting all that sun. Kinda. But they don't necessarily need one. We've done the research on this. To be honest, it can only help. It can't hurt them. but we'd recommend you guys looking into it and making that decision on your own. Now, you've already kind of mentioned it, but they're also going to need 3 hides in their enclosure. One goes on the what end?
Cold end.
And one goes on the
Hot end.
hot end. They are also going to need a 3rd
And
hide.
something need to go on the warm end.
Right, and they're also going to need a humidity hide. You remember how we made one for the ball python? Basically, all the humidity hide is like a smaller hide with something like sphagnum moss or some type of moss that will hold in humidity in that hide.
Yeah.
Because leopard geckos do need humidity, and that humidity will help them be able to shed. Because with leopard geckos, stuck shed can turn into things like them getting the circulation cut off in their toes, losing toes, and you don't want that. Definitely don't want your little girl losing toes.
Yeah.
Little pinky toes.
Yeah. But this is a pinky, and this is a pinky.
We gotta tell your monitors, those are your pinkies, not edible pinkies.
Yeah.
They will also use this humidity hide to drink from, because leopard geckos won't necessarily drink from a water bowl. You should still include a water bowl, but they are more for drinking droplets of water. So when it rains, droplets of water come down and they drink up those little droplets. Exactly like the frilled dragon.
Yeah.
So in the humidity hide, they'll drink up some of those droplets, and when you spray down the enclosure, they'll also drink up those droplets.
Yeah.
And next onto substrate, which is the stuff that they walk in. It goes on the bottom, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people will think, with coming from places like Afghanistan and Iran, that they're entirely in the desert. This is untrue. In Afghanistan, there are all kinds of different terrains. Grassland, mountain areas. It's not all just a desert. They've got all kinds of different environments there.
Yeah.
And leopard geckos come more from the grasslands, not necessarily the desert.
Yeah, because that's where snakes are.
That's where we found that carpet, what was it? The saw scale viper in the desert.
Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah.
So sand is really, especially calcium sand, is pretty much the absolute worst substrate you can put them in. I really dislike when we go into pet stores and we see them keeping their leopard geckos on calcium sand, instructing people to use that.
Yeah.
When calcium sand it can cause impaction, which is when they ingest some of that sand, it's basically a blockage, where the same thing can happen in a lot of different animals, where they can no longer process food, process urate, fecal matter, the nasty stuff, and they pretty much get blocked up and die.
Yeah.
Don't want that. We want your little girl to live the full 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And you're taking her to college
Yeah.
and showing all your friends.
But I'm not.
One day when you go,
Yeah.
you're gonna take her with you.
Yeah, but if it's a venomous snake, no thanks.
No, not a venomous snake, your gecko.
Yeah.
You can take her everywhere with you.
Yeah, but what if she gets off of the leash?
A leash?
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna have to carry her in like a little carry-around cage.
Yeah, we could do that to one of our nine monitors.
Good. So some good substrates for a leopard gecko would be like Repticarpet, that carpet stuff that we have a lot of. Newspaper, paper towels work perfectly fine for them. They're not really eye-pleasing, however they do the job just as well. And I've seen a lot of people use like slate and tile. Those actually look really cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different non-loose substrate options that you guys have out there. And our last point to the enclosure with leopard geckos is make sure you're giving them time to adjust in the new enclosure when you first bring them home. Because we get it, you bring home a new reptile and you just want to hold them, hang out with them and all of that. But you got to give them time to get used to the enclosure, to get used to a whole new environment. Because when you're holding them before they get into and before they become comfortable, it's pretty much just causing unnecessary stress. So you want to give them that like week to 2 weeks to adjust in the new enclosure, right?
Yeah. And they do need diet.
And finally, on to
Diet!
diet for the leopard gecko. So leopard geckos are entirely insectivores. They are not vegetarians. They are not carnivores. They are not fruitarians. They are insectivores, which means they eat what? Insectivores.
Insects.
Insects, exactly. Their diet should consist of a variety. You just said a few of them. Like, go ahead.
Crickets and
Dubai roaches, mealworms, hornworms, all kinds of insects.
Yeah, all kinds.
And those insects should always be dusted with like a calcium powder. You could get that calcium powder at any reptile store. And basically dusting them is dusting the crickets or whatever you're feeding them with that calcium powder you can get anywhere.
Yeah, but Daddy,
What?
if there was anything like the side of his head, he would have ate it.
You think he'd eat it?
Yeah.
She likes to eat. And then besides a food bowl in the enclosure, you're also going to want to include a calcium bowl for them. And also like a multivitamin, a reptile multivitamin once a week. Gonna keep her healthy.
Yeah.
Healthy little gecko.
Yeah.
And then finally, oh, did you see her yawn? She just yawned. And then finally, baby leopard geckos should be fed daily. And as they get older, it can be spread out to more like 2 to 3 times a week. But as a baby, as they're growing, you gotta eat when you're growing, right?
Yeah.
Gotta build up.
Yeah, even when I'm growing, I have to eat.
Exactly. Alright guys, so that does it for Polka Dot, our leopard gecko. That was pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
I like hanging out with her.
Yeah.
So if you guys found this informative or fun, make sure to leave us a like. And don't forget to subscribe, because next week we're either going to be doing our lizard taming video or our other reptile.
Yeah.
We'll see. Alright guys, we'll see you on Wednesday.
Bye.
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 Say bye, gecko.